We kind of draw on all those things in what we do. Yeah, so without, you know what, I think what would be a cool thing, we're going to play one movement from a piece by Vijay Iyer. And then maybe after you listen to it, we can show you a little bit about how it worked and play a couple sections for you again that you may get into more. Vijay is an amazing pianist. He comes from an improvised music tradition. You'll see him on the cover of things like Downbeat magazine and Jazz Times. Though Adam made a good point the other day. I'm not sure he would call what he does jazz, more of a broader improvised tradition. He's really influenced by a Carnatic Indian music tradition. So some of the rhythmic stuff that you'll hear are really, really fun kind of influences of a Carnatic tradition. He's also very influenced by West African drumming tradition, so you'll hear those kind of things. But also what was really fun about working with Vijay is Vijay's a piano player, so we commissioned a piece for keyboard instruments, thinking he has a really amazing approach to keyboards, and for us that's marimba and vibes. And also what we wanted to do, he writes a lot of classical music, a lot of music for string orchestras, string quartets, that kind of thing, but we wanted to really get in the room with him and hear how he works with his own small groups. He has a kind of well-known trio and sextet. And so he started to teach us some of that rhythmic language and some things that get really hard to write down on paper in a kind of notated tradition that a lot of us come from. And so you'll hear at the end of this movement something we can talk about a little bit more after you hear it, but this idea that as the ensemble, we're going to do a huge Celarondo. And by the time you get to the end of the Celarondo, the bars are moving so fast that it actually, if you play one note per bar, it's actually going to be the same time signature as if you were playing 5 notes per bar at the beginning. So it just kind of constantly cycles on itself. And it's something when you see it on the page, it makes no sense. But Vijay was kind of able to explain it to us in a way that like, oh, I see where you're coming from. And it was exciting to work with him in a way that he works with his bands. So we have more projects ahead with Vijay. We really love his music. Let us play you this little, I think it's only about 4 minutes, this movement, and then maybe we can tell you a bit more about it. The piece is called Torque. Let me just tell you too. Sorry, Nelson. That was an amateur move right there. Didn't introduce ourselves. We're going to be pretty chill, and we're going to get into some questions and answers. My name's Jason. This is Eric right here in the late night shirt. Josh in the Eau Claire's hat. Adam in New Music Black. And, okay, cool. We'll learn your names later. Wow, that was exhilarating for us. We didn't warm up today. But it was very, very fun as well. And percussionists yesterday, I just want you to know as you watch us play tonight, or if anybody can come tonight, yesterday in our dress rehearsal, we started to talk about some kind of ways of communicating in terms of chamber music. And the more you see us communicating, the more you know we need each other. You know, we build in a lot of cues as we work together. So it actually felt kind of nice that we haven't played that in a while and we got through it. But tonight, it's going to be smoking. Me and Adam just talked about something to a rhythmic kind of concept in here that we could show off for you all. We haven't tried this before, but it's pretty neat. So I was telling you that some of these ideas come from a Carnatic tradition. And I'm not going to speak with huge knowledge of it. But the way the rhythmic structure in this piece is put together is really, really interesting. It's based on fives. And the idea that, so if you look at it on the page, it would be written, I guess, in 5/16. And there would be 5 groups of 5/16 make up a kind of larger cycle, right? So these kind of like nested ideas, right? So when you hear me and Adam at the beginning, Adam played the low notes. It was like boom, gat, boom, boom, gat, again 1, gat, boom, boom, gat. So that's kind of the bigger 5 bars, right? But then each of these bars is divided into 5 smaller notes. And what was really cool, we feel like with this project, oftentimes we meet with the composer and we're like, oh yeah, I get what you're doing, I get what you're doing. We're pretty quick with it. And Vijay brought in this idea, and we started to look at it on the page and we were like, I don't know how to do this. It really just kind of brought us to our knees in a way. It was like, this is really difficult for us. Because what he does within this, check this out, is that if you take 5 eighth notes, so 5 groups of 2, jung, 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 and 5 groups of 3, jung, gong, 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 that's going to fill in your 5 bars, right? Bum, 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 bum is the 2s, and then bum, 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 bum is the 3s. And we were like, okay, I can see this. And we're pretty good at playing music together, so we were like, okay, let's not worry about the bar line so much. Let's just play this in a way that works, you know? We kind of got it together. And Vijay came into the rehearsal and was like, cool, it sounds totally wrong to me. What's wrong? Are you not hearing the downbeats? And we kind of sheepishly were like, yeah, I guess we figured out a way to do it with that. You know, and the feel was just totally wrong for him. So we spent a long time figuring out how to make that rhythmic cycle line up with the groups of 5, right? So if you play in 5/16, one way to think of it is
2 plus 3 of each.
Right, is like a 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3. So he was really feeling that. If anybody wants to tap on their leg, 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. So we had to be able to figure out how to do that, but also do our 2s and 3s together with it, right? So for me, my part is the 2s first and then the 3s. Right? Are you following? Over here? Kind of. Okay, stop tapping on your foot now. 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Right? But that's not what you have to be able to do. You have to be able to play that in canon with each other. So this was just really, I have to say, we felt kind of like elementary again when like we feel like we're pretty good at rhythm. Kind of supposed to be pretty good at rhythm. It's kind of what we do. And it was like, But then to really jump into this was really exciting. So you have to be able to do it in a canon. Adam's part starts with the 3s.
Yeah, so.
And then goes to the 2s.
Mine is 5/3 bars of 5. Plus 5/2 bars of 5. His is the opposite.
Right.
5/2 bars of 5, and then 5/3 bars of 5. So if you ever like to think, if there are any math nerds in here who like thinking about like fractals and sort of nested kind of structures, basically we've got 5s and 5s and 5s, but also 5s over groups within the 5s. Let's just think 5. Just think the word 5 while we're doing this. So the trick of what Jason's talking about right now is that it's hard enough to get these 5/3 and 5/2 things, but he and I actually have to do it in opposite combination.
Totally.
We're going to attempt it.
So will you show us the 3 and the 5? I'm going to do it the opposite way. And let's see, we've never done this for anybody before, so if this crashes and burns, just still try to have some inkling of respect for us. We're going to try. We're going to try.
If this crashes and burns, don't take any.
Yeah, it's cool. No videotape.
Talking about our 5, right?
Ready, go. I love this. We did it, crash and burn. I hope somebody videoed that and get it up online as quickly as possible. No, I'm just joking. I really love this manner of practicing, and I'm not realizing it until right now. One of the things I love teaching is, for a percussionist, how to use multiple limbs of your body, right? Drum set style, right? But really how to think in multiple ways at the same time. And I think that's just a really great thing for a chamber musician, right? If we were sharing the stage with a string quartet and you talk to a member of a string quartet about how they hear, I guarantee you they would talk about being able to hear their part in relation to another part, right? You have to you're playing with other people, so you have to know the whole score. And for us, that can really mean it's not enough to just play your line and not understand the bar lines, right? So for percussionists, to be able to really practice with different limbs of your body so that you really internalize what a beat is or what different segments of the beat is, I just think is kind of an amazing, it opens up a key to lots of areas, I think. So it's exciting to me. So I do that a lot. Even trying to count the groups of 5 while I'm thinking I should be able to show you some of this right now, and I'm not sure what would happen. But being able to count your larger groups of 5 while you play those. Not so it's a party trick, but so that you really challenge yourself to actually being able to hear those cycles, Yeah.
Is anybody here, and I'm not that familiar, but is anybody here familiar with Serbian and Bulgarian and other kinds of Eastern European music and dancing that has lots of odd meters and stuff? So what happens a lot in some of that music, again, not that familiar with it, but 7s, 9s, things like that are very common in the actual folk dance music. And what they'll often do is their steps will reflect the shorter and longer pulses. So in R5 right here, this is not a Serbian or Bulgarian dance in any form that I'm doing right now. I'm just showing you steps. Different size or length steps. They have ways of doing it in their body so that it feels natural. And actually, there's this great essay by Bela Bartok about Bulgarian rhythms where he laments the fact that, by and large, Western classical music instrumentalists have a very, very difficult time doing these different 3s and 2s and stuff. And when he gets frustrated about it, he claims, I can go to any Bulgarian village, and any person in that village would know how to divide these rhythms, but I can go to the London Philharmonic, and they'd be like, what? This was in 1938 that he wrote this. I think it's kind of still true today, but the reason that some folk dancers and musicians in Bulgaria could do it is that they would have it in their body. So for me, the way of unlocking this rhythm was actually what we were just doing here, but even me getting used to how this feels in my body, and actually then doing the thing along with it. So as percussionists, one of the reasons percussionists are good at rhythm, for those of you who are not percussionists, is not just necessarily natural aptitude, but the fact that we learn how to express all of these different conflicting things in our bodies. And a lot of times other musicians, they might not have as much time or learning or exposure to that idea that, different parts of my body will actually articulate these things, and then it'll become intuitive. So if you ever have a chance to go on a YouTube sort of quest of checking out Bulgarian folk dance or whatever, you will see 50 people going out on stage together, all perfectly dancing in 9 and 7 without missing a single step. It's a really interesting thing to think about if you want to be able to do music that goes into these different odd meters.
So I wonder, why don't we play just the opening of this piece one more time? Now that you know the way it's constructed, see if you can hear. At the beginning, you'll hear these big groups of 5. And then as we come in, try to follow these smaller groups of 5. And I think if you were to follow each of our parts, if you look at the vibraphone parts as well, you'll be able to see that everybody's playing some version of this 2 and 3 in different places. We'll just play a little touch of this for you. And then I'd like to tell you a little bit more about this Celarondo idea, and we can listen to that one more time. So this is the beginning with this kind of 2 and 3 idea.
We could stop somewhere.
thank you for your polite second applause. But were you able to hear that in a different way? We've all, I think, in different ways been reading an essay that a friend of ours has been writing, kind of about rehearing, about kind of like, one possible way to take in music is that at the beginning of the piece, it teaches you a little bit how to hear the piece, right? But then in some ways, as you learn more about how to hear the piece, you can hear what was happening at the beginning in a different way. And I was kind of thinking about that right now. As we talked about what was a part of this piece, I'm sure listening to it again, you had a different way into it. So this is a newish piece of music. I say newish because it was before the pandemic, but we haven't really been talking to audiences about it so much because, we haven't been playing for audiences that much. So I'm kind of excited to try to tell you a little bit about this fractal idea at the end. This is Celarondo. And we can play it for you one more time and see if you can rehear it. And the reason why we're taking these little two components to show for you is that in some ways these are two of the big things that Vijay really took from his work with his bands and kind of was teaching to us, which I think for him was a bit different type of collaboration than purely pen to paper, send the score to the orchestra type of collaboration, which I think also can be really wonderful, but we really value getting in the room together. So this idea where his band would start playing. Okay, so let's see if we can if I can explain it this way. And I think my part is actually a great way to talk about it. My part is kind of the easiest part in this. Josh is really doing the heavy lifting. You'll hear him just get blazingly fast. But my part, the whole time through this cycle, is just playing downbeats. And so if you imagine at the beginning of my part, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, just the downbeats, right? Remember this tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then as you get faster, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. I'll start to play, the bars will go by so fast that the downbeats of the bar will be as fast as the 16th notes were the first time, right? They're like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. Those are, these are the bars that I'm snapping, and by the end, the bars will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then, if you can imagine, right, Vijay's pretty clear, this is going to be in 5 groups of 5 bars, right? So everything's about 5. So let's see, why don't we try to play we're going to play just one cycle of it for you to see how you hear that. And then we'll play you all 5 cycles of it, because of course he does 5 cycles of the 5 bars. That, it's like very 5-ish. Let's do one cycle to see if you can hear it. And then we'll do all 5 for you. It turns out there's so much to talk to you all about this piece to dig into it. This is just the second movement, and the third movement goes into a whole other world if you can come back tonight. But we're going to move on to another side of our commissioning process to show it for you a bit. And then think of some questions along the way, because after we play this piece, we're going to have time to answer a few questions about anything musically or just about, I imagine some students in this room may be thinking, thinking about a career in music, and we're open to those questions as well. But I think Eric's going to take the mic and tell us a bit about this next piece. We just premiered it last month. It's in 3 movements, and we're going to play the 3rd movement for you. And the composer is Nathalie Joachim. She is amazing performer and composer. At first, she was really well known as a flute player. She has a duo called Flutronics. Used to play flute in 8th Blackbird. That was part of her performing career. She's an amazing singer. Her album Femme d'été was a album specifically of kind of Haitian folk songs, and her lineage of singers in her family, her grandmother specifically, I think. It was nominated for a Grammy recently. It's really wonderful music to check out. And we're very excited to be working with her on this project. So, Eric Chavich.
I think, like Jason's saying, Natalie's one of these. Actually, I would say it's almost a majority of composers we're working with these days are people who are also performers, and sort of like their practice as a composer is not sitting in a room with a blank sheet of paper or a blank Sibelius screen in front of them, but it's they experience music in the way I would do this thing, and then the way I can transfer it to somebody else for them to do it, or get to some idea of what I'm going for. And that's totally true for Natalie. Like Jason's saying, both as a singer and as a flute player, she's like super experienced performer. And I think that she goes back to the voice. The piece Femme d'été that Jason was referencing uses samples of Natalie's own grandmother, and also many other Haitian women singing these traditional songs. And Natalie herself sings and feels that as like a grounding thing in the music. And so when we started to work on this piece, the other side of her life is being a composer and also being really comfortable with electronics. So her group, Flutronics, uses all flute and electronics together. So she often starts off playing around with an idea of performing, and also going to the computer and seeing like what can the computer do with the thing that I'm interested in right now. And so for our piece, she started with her own voice and using the computer and sort of mocking up these tracks, and then said, okay, how can I make this a piece that percussionists can play? So the solution that we kind of came to together was using these Roland SPD SX sample pads that are, anybody who's doing anything with electronics, percussionists you might know, they're sort of like the standard pad. Any drummer in a rock band that uses samples that you see probably tours with this pad. We have 3 of them now because there's 2 in the piece, and we carry a backup because electronics can be finicky. But what she did is she made a track in the computer, and then she said, okay, how can I cut this track into things that can be performed by a percussionist to make it cool? And I guess the only other thing that's kind of interesting to know about the piece, and maybe we can talk more about after we play it, but she started writing this piece at a moment in her life where I think she was dealing with a lot of anxiety around Femme d'été had come out, it got nominated for the Grammy. She suddenly had lots of people asking her to make new music, and she said yes to everybody because she was psyched about it, but was also just under this incredible strain for the first time. So the 3 movements, we're only going to be playing the 3rd movement, but the progression of the piece, the 1st movement is sort of this, the sample of her voice is based on much more. She's saying, I'm supposed to be doing so much more right now. And she's sort of like having that moment of anxiety and freaking out, like, I know I'm supposed to be doing so much and I can't get anything done. The 2nd movement is called Maybe, and the voice sample is maybe if I took a nap. And she's talking about like, maybe I'm too freaked out right now, I just need to take a nap for 20 minutes and I could get some real work done. And then this 3rd movement that we're playing is sort of like the moment when she wakes up from the nap and she's like, okay, I gotta do something, I'm motivated now. So this movement is called Motivated, and this is like sort of she talks about it as like she always composes with this burst of frantic energy because suddenly she has, like all the ideas come to her at once and she's gotta get it all down on the page. So I think we're meant to embody the frantic energy of that moment.
We were just having a team meeting, thinking maybe we'll play an excerpt of this one for you. Make you come tonight. You're gonna have to come tonight to hear the whole thing. We're gonna play maybe up to D, Eric, if that works. And this was what Eric was just saying was a very cool part of the process, because I don't know any performers in here who've worked with composers. Oftentimes these days when composers are writing music on Sibelius or Logic or some kind of DAW, some kind of software, the tempos get so fast because you don't have to worry about humans playing them, right? That constantly things are just written too fast. And as performers, we say, hey, maybe we should slow it down. And we kind of had that moment with her for this one, and she's like, yeah, I get it, but this is supposed to be the frantic energy of me trying to get motivated to make, to make music, to make art. So it was really cool to talk with her about the idea that actually when, if a note gets by you or if something goes wrong on the detail level, it's not that important as long as the energy is really huge. But if the energy is kind of slow and everything's perfect, the music's not going to work, right? And I remember as a student having a hard time feeling out that big picture. And it was really cool to be reminded of that here. So I forget, Nelly, do you have the sample lined up? Maybe we could just do like a 30-second sample of her singing, if you wouldn't mind. I don't know if that'll work. Yeah. So we're going to start with this. This is her kind of intro. We'll hear just a little of her intro, and then we'll go into the movement. Awesome. Thank you all. This is really exciting to play music for people. Can I take a moment and just recognize that? It's really exciting to play music for you all. We were touring some over the summer into the fall, and then we were mostly just in New York. We played one big show for us, but we haven't been on the road again. And this spring, we're really excited to play music for people. So thank you. It was exhilarating for us. I hope it was cool for you. We wanted to just play a little excerpt. There's obviously more to talk about, and there's a lot of music we're going to present tonight that would be fun to dig into. But we wanted to take a second and just see what was on you all's minds. If anybody has thought of some questions that you would like to know, either about the music that you've heard, the music you're going to hear tonight, or really anything about what we do, why we do it, how we do it, anything like that. So does anybody have a hand raise? Yeah.
These little squares here. Excuse me. What do they do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Eric, do you have Angelica's piece to start at all? We had a question about these squares. So the first piece we're going to play for you tonight is a pretty newish piece by a friend of ours, Angelica Negron. She's an amazing composer. She's a singer. She's a band. And one of the things she has been experimenting with for a while, especially when she plays solo, is playing along with these bricola instruments. They would be described as by the maker as like robots, really. So they're MIDI instruments. So meaning from the computer, it's sending information here. The only thing these can do is on and off, right? So there's a little beater here that will hit and then not hit. And so her idea here with the music we're going to play with it is a little bit of a, person versus machine idea, or a kind of like organic vibe versus a robotic vibe. But she puts all different kinds of things on top of this to get sound. And this first movement that we're going to play, she uses these, what are they? Plexiglass, what are they? Acrylic. They're pretty intense. It's like, so you'll hear in a second. Eric can turn them on. They're a pretty intense, not so delicate sound. And then halfway through the piece, I won't tell you what happens. We do something to them to make them become, do something very fun to them to make it become a little more sustainable for your ears. They're really intense. So this is what these sound like. They can do inhuman things. Not that, we could totally do that. But I'm just joking. They do inhuman things, right? And it's actually part of a 4-movement piece she's going to be writing for us. So she does some things in her set where she'll put like books on top of them, or wooden cigar boxes, and they all have a kind of different sound. Are any of you all into, there's a German techno band, Kraftwerk, who's kind of a thing to check out, yes? And she's really influenced kind of by Kraftwerk too. And part of what they would do when they would set up on stage is they would oftentimes just be in a line, not even looking at each other, just very kind of impersonal almost. And so she wanted us to play music in a way that was less kind of we could all see each other and less chamber music-y and more, Kraftwerk-y. So we're in a line, which is very different than you'll see us play other things. But cool question, thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? I promise I'll pass the mic too if you have a question for anybody. Yeah, Delaney.
I'm working on something right now with an SPDSX, and mostly what I've done is just like plug and play stuff. And I just wanted to know when you all were starting, like what resources did you find helpful? Because it's very overwhelming.
Very cool. I'm going to pass to Eric. He's the resident SPDX guy.
I will say YouTube is like the most incredible resource, and frankly, like a lot of technology stuff, I'll Google it, or I'll just go on YouTube and see who's posted videos about how to do this stuff. So SPD, I will say it's a far from perfect solution. I think it's kind of the industry standard. I hope that there are better options in the future because it's like a very finicky machine. But I would say starting on YouTube or whatever. Honestly, to me, the strength of the SPD is loading samples onto the unit directly. It can also run MIDI and control off of your computer, but it hasn't felt like it does the best job of that to me.
Not knowing anything about the technical side, but we're ensemble residents at Princeton University, and one thing that Princeton has is a laptop orchestra. First in the country, very proud of this. It's called Plork, real catchy. But you can't play a drum in a laptop orchestra. You have to do something electronic. But so the SPD is really great because you can get a pedal, so you feel like you're playing a bass drum. And it's really fun. The guy who runs it, Jeff Snyder, kind of builds his own sample, like drum banks. And it's great to go, the Roland History, the 808 or the 909, those are really great drum machines who sound really, really cool that you can plug in those sounds easily. But he'll make awesome snare drum sounds out of just, white noise or, field recordings or whatever. And it's really fun to play around like that. So I guess my experience is more just playing other people's samples. But I'll say the Roland, it's not perfect like that either. There are 9 pads, and the top 3 pads feel weird to me. But the bass drum pedal attachment is really great, I think, for what that's worth.
Yeah, I think it is a great question, and Plork is sort of like designed to ask this question of like, how do you make it interesting to perform with electronics? Because, if you've ever been to see like a DJ or, like anybody who makes EDM, or a lot of times they stand behind their laptop and they're like, press play, and then dance to their music or whatever, or they rely on like awesome visuals behind them or something like that. But there should be a way that as musicians we can interact directly with these things. Plork is actually the first laptop orchestra in the world, but now there are laptop orchestras all over the place, and a lot of them spend a lot of their time thinking about like how can we make it really dynamic to interact. Like we're playing with Natalie's voice here, and the really cool thing, the piece exists in a way that Natalie can be on stage with us and sing that introduction live in person, and then you hear us manipulate, or we can play that introduction and she's never here, but you're aware of her voice and those kinds of things. I think that SPD at least allows us to use the skill we have as drummers and perform. And a lot of what we think about with many of our pieces is like we developed certain skills to play drums, right? It's like you practice rudiments and things like that, and then you can apply those to all kinds of different things. Wine glasses or robots, or we have a piece for a string quartet where we play on violins and viola and cello. I think that electronics kind of give you endless possibilities for sound, but not necessarily endless possibilities for performance. And it's a cool thing to think about, especially when you're in school.
I would also say too, and I think we're in this weird space right now where there are amazing things like the SPDX to free you up to do a lot of awesome stuff, but then you're sort of limited by if it doesn't work. And that particular machine, maybe buy 3 power supplies, because I think we've had issues with the power supplies over the last couple of years, and it's like, if you build a whole piece, like Natalie's piece is centered around those 2 SPDXs, and we have 1 extra one we tour with. If JetBlue drops them and all 3 are broken, we just have to cancel the piece. And that's a thing we've decided to gamble with. But I think just have in the back of your head, is there a backup? Do I have a way to sort of deal with this? And when better technology comes out, is there a way to take that and put it on the new stuff? Anyway, just to say, this feels like an old piece of technology, oddly, that's been around for a second, but it can limit. But also, too, I would say, get in there and ask it to do things it wasn't intended to do. Sometimes that's the most fun thing to do with, a guitar pedal. Is, get it and be like, yeah, it was built for guitar, but what can I run a bunch of cymbals through this? And can I put it through blah, blah, blah? And can I put my voice through this guitar pedal? Just, really sort of get in there and tear it apart and see how you can sort of hijack it a little bit. You might learn more about the instrument that way than, in addition to the YouTube stuff, you might learn more just by getting in and messing with stuff.
The only thing, I will jump off of what Josh was just saying, our colleague Dan Truman at Princeton he's a professor of composition there, and he's the one who started the laptop orchestra there. One of the things he's really interested in is that when you get any kind of piece of music technology, whether it's a program like Logic or Ableton or SPD, the things are often designed to be able to do what most folks are using them for. And that's cool, but you may find, if you're in a kind of experimental mindset, you may find that you want to do some different things with it. And you realize you're actually being funneled by the technology towards doing a narrower set of things. You're like, oh, this is made for people to make beats for clubs. Everything I do seems to somehow keep bringing me back there because the instrument itself or the technology itself is made for that. It kind of keeps going. So one thing that Dan explores a lot is how can he either invent instruments or reverse engineer things so that all of these other sort of tangents are possible with how you use the technology, because it's not set up to automatically kind of start funneling you in a certain way. So just to ask yourself when you're using a piece of technology, what did the designer of this program or item think I was going to be doing with it, and to what extent does the design sort of lead me that way? And can I hack it? Can I can I go in a different direction with it? That could be really fun.
I think Angelica is a great example. Like, these robots are a product of her using a program in a slightly more experimental way than it was intended. All that's doing is sending a 1 or a 0, which is what a MIDI trigger is, right? And you can send a MIDI sample to an organ in your Logic session. You can send it to whatever. You can send it to trigger some other MIDI instrument. You can set up a dummy keyboard that will trigger it, but she's setting it up to just send a 1 or 0 to a piston. She also does it with vegetables. So if you take little electrodes and stick them in vegetables, it creates a little current. And if you send a 1 or 0 to that, and then you touch that vegetable, complete the circuit, it triggers a drone, or it triggers a patch in her Logic or her Ableton session. So she is actually getting in there and sort of like, yeah, cool, we can trigger like awesome organ sounds, but like, what if we triggered a banana? Or what if I use the banana as the trigger? And like those sorts of things, then when she comes to you all, like you all don't maybe know or should care that that's what she's done, but she's got a whole table full of vegetables. And like that's the thing the audience remembers, and it's because she went in and was creative with a program that, and using it in a way it wasn't necessarily intended for.
I totally agree with that. Angelica came to my mind as an example, because in a class we were teaching recently, she was talking about a pretty kind of theatrical, weirdly ambient, not ambient, but like kind of like a rhythmic piece that she wrote. Percussionists here may know it. It's called Count to 5. It's really awesome. And Dan, the professor of the class we were co-teaching with, asked, hey, how did you write this piece? And she's like, actually, in Puerto Rico, I got really into the program Fruity Loops, which is made oftentimes to make a kind of like beat-based, reggaeton kind of music. And I used that program to write this weirdly arrhythmic piece. And I just like watching his face be like, you hacked that to make this, right? It's like you kind of worked against it to find something totally new. And I think that's we've all said it, but it feels like a nice thing to kind of highlight. Like, yeah, pushing your skills against what's being thrown at you is a really cool way to find something new, I think, What other hands we got? Yeah.
Hey, Jay.
In these sections.
I think this will be our last question. Perfect.
Okay. In the sections of the pieces you play, I'm struck, and maybe erroneously, by the presence of more ostinato than perhaps in other genres of music. Do you feel that? Are there more patterns like that to build off of in the music you play?
Yeah, well, let me see. I would say, weirdly, maybe not weirdly, this one we showed for you definitely, I think, was based on that kind of 2-3, the pattern that kind of cycles, and oftentimes, I think we love pulse-based music, and in some ways in our tradition, or in the Eurocentric classical music tradition, right? Like drummers were kind of, taken out of the scene pretty quickly, right? There's an interesting history to that, but it's kind of like, let's make a music without rhythm, So a lot of what we got excited about in our history is the rhythm, and so oftentimes I think that can lead to a sense of ostinato. I would say actually strangely over here, though that was extremely pulse-based music, I have very few measures that are the same. Maybe her voice will be looping something that you can hear, but what's happening for us on the snare drum is actually like a chatter that doesn't repeat so much. But I know what you mean in terms of like, sometimes for us, the chamber music side of what we do can be sensed more in terms of the way we communicate, and we've kind of looked to string quartets and the way they communicate to play. Sometimes the kind of surface detail of what sounds like chamber music to someone, right? Oftentimes, well, I don't know. Oftentimes classical music could have an ostinato, but we can be more kind of rhythmically in your up front. You know what I mean? It is funny to think of, for us, I think it's fair to say none of this music, besides possibly this one over here, would have been written to play in a chamber, right? The idea that we're going to get together in a living room and hear music together. Our music was made for the stage, and so sometimes the chamber music side is the kind of way we relate to each other. You know what I mean? Very cool question. Very cool question. We would love to answer anybody's questions. I know we're out of time. I will say we're pretty easy to get a hold of. Our website is sopercussion.com. You can email us individually. Our name's jason@sopercussion.com. We love answering questions. Any music students, percussionists or not. I would also just give a shout out. We're really excited this summer that we're getting our summer program back together in person. We run a 2-week seminar institute, so Percussion Summer Institute for percussionists and composers and occasionally non-percussionists as well. It's in July out in Princeton. We're really pumped about it. It's possible there's a virtual version as well if you can't make it out to Princeton. So if you're interested in that, please ask us some questions about it. We're more excited than you could know to get together with students again in the summer. It's been a couple years where we've been virtual, so this energy feeding off of each other is really, really wonderful. So thanks for taking an hour to hang out with us, and if you can, please come back tonight. Thank you, Terry, and SOU for putting this together, and for Chamber Music Concerts for having us tonight.